Okay, everyone. So we are on day 3 of the Judicial Branch Unit, talking about the court structure, sort of how it works, and the nomination process today. This Article 2 in the Constitution basically gives the president the ability to nominate judges, and that's not just the Supreme Court; it's the lower, it's all federal courts. So it really ends up being lots of positions. There are hundreds of positions in the federal courts. So the president can nominate and the Senate confirms. They leave out the House in this process, but the Senate can confirm the nominations. Now, if it is a lower level one, if you look at the bottom there, where the federal court system, the basic structure of what we are going, the only thing we really worry about in here is this part of the federal court system. The district courts are the lowest level federal courts, and then the U.S. Courts of Appeal, the middle level, and then the U.S. Supreme Court. So for the first one there, which is really the lowest level, district courts, there is this thing called senatorial courtesy. Kind of a long definition, but basically, since the president gets to appoint, what he does is if it's the district courts are where a lot of federal cases start. There's at least one in every state. A state like Montana has one, North Carolina has 3. And so what the president does, because the Senate gets the right to the ability to confirm the nominations, is the president will kind of defer to a senator from the state where there's an opening on the district court, because there's so many of these positions and it's only the lowest level. And if that senator is from his party, and whichever one's the senior senator, so 2 senators from every state. If it was an opening, if Montana had an opening on their district court and there were 2 senators, if they were both Republican, whichever one has been on the Senate the longest, basically gets to pick, it's not exactly like that, but we'll say gets to pick the nominee and the president will just go along with it. If there was 1 Republican and 1 Democratic senator, then the Republican would basically get to help decide who that district court judge is. If there were 2 Democrats and the president was Republican, they would never let the Democrats pick. So there would be another way they would do that. So this is just called senatorial courtesy. So senatorial courtesy, the definition then is the senior senator from the state with a district court opening gets to have a lot of control over who the judge will be in that district court. And then the Senate will generally go along with whoever they pick to. So this is something that's developed over time. Now, when it comes to the actual Supreme Court and who you are choosing, if you're a president and there's an opening, well, these positions are really important, and it's one of the most important things you're going to do while you're in office. So the president will, number one, try to find someone who he agrees with their ideology, who thinks like him. So, it's definitely not supposed to be Republican or Democrat. And so he'll have people out there who will be going through all of the sort of a lot of lower federal court, lower level federal courts, going through those, looking for judges who might fit to what he's looking for. So what they'll do is they will narrow down to a handful of people whose ideology meets what the president wants. But then also they'll factor in things like the race, the gender, the religion of the person, whatever the ethnicity. And because there are other things you might want to consider if all things are equal. So if you have 5 judges that you're good with all of them, and there's something that one of them could bring, if there was not a certain race or a certain religion or something that wasn't there, maybe there wasn't one of those people on the court, and so the president goes, I'll do that. So you factor in a lot of things, but number one is ideology, and the thing that the president and the senators are most interested in is what's called a litmus test. Now, this isn't like in some sort of science class, but a litmus test is basically how does the judge, potential nominee, how does that nominee, how do they think, what do they think on a certain topic, and that will decide if they're liberal or conservative. And the number one thing that people want to find out is abortion. So you want to find out if you're a president and you want a pro-choice judge, that's the litmus test. How does he feel on that issue? But a justice will generally not give their opinion on this. I won't get into all this now, but the whole nomination process and how it goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee and then to the full Senate is a really interesting process, at least for me. I know some of you may know what happened with Kavanaugh when he went through there, and there was a lot of other outside stuff. I say outside, it wasn't just about his belief on issues. That was what he went through first, and then there were some other things that came up. But just on the sheer, solely the intellectual debate and how judges answer questions in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, to me, is really interesting. And the Judiciary Committee will usually take 3, 4, 5 days grilling the person for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So it is an interesting thing. In class we may watch a few minutes here and there of some of those those happenings. Now, the court system, the federal court system. So this is kind of going, I guess, in ascending order. So district court's the lowest level of federal court. So if you break a federal law, you would go to federal district court. And then everybody whatever the decision is in district court, everybody's allowed at least one appeal. So the district courts, there are 94 of them, at least one in every state, and they're spread out, obviously, around the country. If you don't like the decision in the district courts and you appeal, it goes to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and there are 12 regional courts of appeal, and they have to accept the appeals. And then if you don't like the decision from there, you can appeal to the Supreme Court. Or the Supreme Court can get cases a lot of other ways. And the Supreme Court does not have to hear every case, obviously. They hear a very, very small percentage of cases that are appealed to them. So you have the lowest levels of district courts, and then the U.S. Court of Appeals, and then the Supreme Court. Now, we won't fill out this whole thing now. I usually do this in class, but I'll show you basically what that is. It's a little different this way, but like I said, over here, we're concerned with the U.S. District Courts, 94, U.S. Courts of Appeal, and then the Supreme Court. All the other things you won't hear much about in your, probably in your life, but it is kind of interesting to note that the way over here on the right side, that the military has a separate avenue of courts because they have a separate set of gnarly laws, but military rules, totally different than civilians. So you see there's a military process over here that can go to the Supreme Court. These are the regional courts of appeal. So you can see we're in the 4th, I guess they call it Circuit Court of Appeals. You see the 1st actually includes Puerto Rico down here. In Pennsylvania includes the U.S. Virgin Islands. You see, though, these ones are smaller geographically, but then the 9th way over here is huge geographically. So that's before California became so populated. So they're a very busy court over here, the 9th. And then, much like the Electoral College map, the 9th would be a really liberal one. They generally make liberal decisions. The 5th is often considered to be the most conservative of the courts of appeal, and the 8th is pretty conservative too. And so, in the 1st would be a little more liberal, but the 9th is generally the most liberal, and the 5th is the most conservative. Now, the last stuff for this session, just some vocab terms mostly. So Supreme Court sessions begin in October, end in early summer. 10,000 or more cases, and they'll take less than 1% really. A lot of years they'll take like 70 cases, 80 cases. So what happens is if somebody appeals their case to the court, they are asking the court to issue what they call a writ of cert, which is an order to be certain. And so basically what they are doing is they're saying to the court, they're saying ask the lower courts, demand that the lower courts send the records up to the Supreme Court of the lower court case. And so this would be an order to be certain. It's an order to send those records up from the lower case. This is the appeals process. If the cases are appealed to the Supreme Court, they will have aides who will go through and they will kind of summarize all these different cases, all the cases. They'll go through them and look at them, and basically ones, if they're totally ridiculous, they'll toss them aside. If they think the judge might be interested, they write up a summary. And so they're going to send, maybe hundreds of maybe 200 cases, who knows, to a judge and say, what do you think about these? And the judge decides then if he's interested in hearing the case. A minimum of 4 of the 9 justices have to agree for that case to be accepted by the court. And then if it is accepted, it will be placed on the docket. The docket is basically the list of cases. So a minimum of 4 justices have to agree to hear a case. And then if they do, it goes on the docket. When the case is accepted to be heard, before it will be heard, both sides are going to send a brief, which is going to be sort of a long rationale as to how the case should be decided from each side. So it's all their arguments are laid out in the briefs. And so the judges ahead of time will have read the briefs from each side. And then they also will get amicus briefs, they're called, which are friend of the court briefs. So anybody who's interested in the outcome of a Supreme Court decision can send a brief. The justices generally won't read them unless it's some, if it was the NRA or the U.S. government or some big organization, then they would read it. But anybody can send a friend of the court brief. So the judges will know pretty much every argument on both sides ahead of time. It goes to the court. Each side in the case only gets 30 minutes. They're not allowed to use notes. They basically get up there and they start talking, and the justices interrupt them right away, and they just question them for 30 minutes. So one side gets 30 minutes, the other side gets 30 minutes, and that's it. So the lawyers who are arguing have to be really well schooled on past cases of the court, how the current judges decided on other cases. They have to know all the facts of the case. Again, no notes. So after hearing these, the judges will go and they'll meet in conference, which is just the 9 judges. They will start with the Supreme Court Chief Justice and then go in order of seniority, and they'll just basically go around and kind of just give their informal opinion on a case. At the end of this, the justices will all get a feel. They'll be like, oh, we know right now it's 6-3. And then if the Supreme Court Chief Justice is in the majority, he will assign the majority opinion to be written by someone. He can take it or he can assign it to someone in the majority. Then the dissenting side will write their opinion, maybe a couple of them. If the Chief Justice is not on the majority side, then the most senior member of the court on whatever the majority side is, he decides who gets to write the opinion. And so that's not final, though. So they could be writing these opinions 4 months before the case is announced. And so if it's 6-3, but the dissenting side has some really good ideas, and a few of those 6 move over to the 3, the 3 side, the dissenting side, could become the majority. So that could change. This is all kind of, they pass notes around, they pass opinions around behind the scenes. So then when they release their opinions, you can be the majority opinion, all right? You could then be in the bottom one there, the dissenting opinion. So I disagree with the majority. Or a concurring opinion. A concurring opinion is I agree with the majority opinion, but not necessarily their exact rationale, and here's why. And so if you're in the concurring, you still count towards that majority total. So lately you've had a lot of 5-4 decisions. But those decisions, they can start coming out really anytime during the year. If they heard a case in October, they may release something in January or February. Most of those decisions start to come out really in May, June, July. They start to just send those out. So anyway, that is where we are in terms of terminology with the court. So I will stop there for today. Thank you.